You are listening to the Spent the Rent podcast. And now, here's your host, Patty Rose.
Hello, I am Patty Rose. This is the Spent the Rent podcast. I'm joined by two of the representatives from S.T.A.R voting, Sara Wolf and Mark Frohnmayer. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
This is
be back.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is insanely short notice. You called me, actually hit me up on Facebook and said, hey, can we come on and talk about S.T.A.R voting? The time is getting close to the election. May 21st is when ballots are due. And this is exciting stuff because you guys have been on my show before, and I'm basically going to be repeating an episode almost. But you were guests, both of you, on episode number 10, my 10th episode back in 2018. And I started this podcast because I wanted to show voices of the underrepresented of Lane County. And you guys are pushing to raise and elevate and make voices louder for each voter. So we're going to talk about how that's possible. And so thanks again for being here. So I'm just going to kind of give a summary. So many of us are so frustrated with a broken voting system. And yet every time the proposals to change the balance of power, they never seem to get enough momentum to get implemented. Today, we're joined by two local individuals who have been working on helping our votes have a much bigger voice since before I started the podcast. But you were both guests, like I just said, on episode 10. If you're not registered with a party, we're going to make sure that I talk about this later. You have blank spots on the ballot. So this is why we need this change, and we'll get to that. But who wants to explain what is S.T.A.R voting? Mark, do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to let Sara set the table here. Sara is the executive director of the Equal Vote Coalition.
Awesome.
I'm the founder. I found it, but Sara and really a whole team of awesome, passionate reformers have been leading the charge here in Eugene and Oregon, and we've got chapters around the country to really. I would say make the promise of representative democracy real.
Okay. Yeah. So Sara, go ahead.
Yeah. So S.T.A.R voting is a super simple proposal. Essentially, it eliminates the need for a primary in a general election. It just streamlines things, and voters only have to vote once. The way you do that is you score your candidates from 0 up to 5 stars. So 5 stars for your favorite, 0 for your last choice, score other candidates as desired. And it's just counted in 2 steps. First off, you find the 2 highest scoring candidates overall, and those are your finalists. Then your full vote goes to the finalist you prefer. So whichever finalist you scored higher gets your 1 vote. And the finalist with the most votes wins.
So it's pretty it's pretty easy to understand. If somebody only wanted to vote for one candidate, they can just put 5, correct? On a candidate, and that's it. Or they could theoretically put 1. However you wanted to do it, you just have to mark 1 and then you're done. So nothing could change there, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like backward compatible with the way that we vote now. If you just want to support one candidate, options. You can put a 5 on that candidate. But if you have any other opinions on the field of candidates, you've got a fair bit of nuance that you can express on multiple candidates in the race.
Yeah.
So we have a question from a Facebook user. I wish they would put their names, but make sure to subscribe to the Spent the Rent podcast. First of all, what's the difference in results between S.T.A.R voting and ranked choice?
Well, the most obvious difference is that S.T.A.R voting uses a 5-star ballot. So score the candidates 0 up to 5 stars, whereas ranked choice uses a ranking ballot. And both of them are more expressive. Both of them let you show your preferences. So there are a lot of similarities. The big difference is that with a ranked ballot, you have absolutely no way to show if your second choice is as good as your favorite or if they're almost as bad as your last choice.
Yeah, that I don't like. I mean, ranked choice voting is better than our current setup, but I think that I don't like the idea because I know that a lot of people don't know, especially on local politics, they don't even know 5 candidates. And so, unfortunately, and that's why I do what I do, trying to introduce people, the average person to candidates, but it's not the case, Go ahead, Mark.
The other piece of that too is that, I mean, to me, the really problematic part of what people call ranked choice voting, which is a system known as instant runoff, is that it lets the voter express that preference order Now, as Sarah pointed out, like you can't express an equal preference in ranked choice, and you can't express a degree of preference in ranked choice. Like I like this one a lot versus this is definitely the lesser evil. I'm giving that one a 1. But so ranked choice lets you put candidates in order, but then the system itself doesn't actually use the rankings of all the voters. It actually
Right.
It's a buggy algorithm
Right.
that discards some of the preferences of some of the voters. And so it ends up because the question was about results. And I think you don't have to look any farther than Alaska, which just implemented ranked choice statewide. And in their very first election with ranked choice, they had this really sideways outcome where the most preferred candidate didn't win. And that was because ranked choice counted the second choices of some of the voters and discarded the second choices of a bunch of the other voters. And so you didn't get a representative outcome. STAR actually, STAR was invented 10 years ago. It kind of came into the voting world amidst this battle between the ranked choice system and the approval voting system. And so STAR is really, I kind of think of it as ranked choice 2.0 or 3.0.
Sure.
It's the next iteration of, ranked choices. It's a 150-year-old system back before they had voting science. It's sort of like the telegraph of voting.
That's why I liked when you said that you had found it because it had already existed. Because that's what we know, it's like what we founded America. Well,
I found it.
And just to chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
So STAR voting is really the evolution of hundreds of years of science on this topic. And it's one of the most fascinating questions in all of science and all of humanity is like, how do we make good collective decisions? How do we measure public opinion? How do we take that data from voters and find representative, good consensus outcomes? And in the year 2000, there was a study that showed that the best system in terms of accuracy and strategic resilience and all of that was a score system with a top 2 runoff. So 0 to 5 star ballot, for example, and then the 2 highest scoring candidates advance to like a general election. And the really revolutionary idea here with STAR voting is you don't have to vote again. STAR voting basically works like that 5-star primary and a top 2 general election, but it solves the problem of having to have 2 elections, which means it solves the problem of excluding people from the general election who we want to hear from.
There's 2 things that I really want to just like drill home and like almost kind of dumb down for people to really understand. And it's the excitement that this is a local thing that we're talking about. This is happening here in Eugene. It's going to be on the ballot in May. And so they have a chance to implement this for the elections moving forward. And so do you want to talk about that first, or do you want to drill home like the process? Like we'll do a scenario where the 3 of us are running for an election and we'll do a scenario of how it works. Which one would you rather do?
I mean, let's talk about the lay of the land, because like you said, this is on the ballot. People are going to be able to vote for it. We're putting up lawn signs now. If you want a lawn sign or you want to get involved, you can go to starvoting.org and hit that sign up button. We've got an email list and a text list for people who want to be engaged, or we have a series of town halls that are co-hosted by Eugene Library and League of Women Voters coming up on the 11th, the 13th, and then again on the 1st. So it's
basically, I mean, this is something that's been, like I said, anyone can go back. I've talked about STAR voting ad nauseum with Alan Zundell has been on multiple times. You guys have been on. I've been pushing for this because I believe that it gives so much more of an equal vote, and that's what you guys talk about. And so it's so important that people can understand how simplistic this is. It sounds complicated. You hear this new thing. It's like, all right, voting's already kind of, I don't understand the 2-party system. Everybody's saying, it's broken. This fixes a lot of it, if not all of it. So this is also one thing that I always like to drill home to, just dumb down. And so this is going to be on nonpartisan seats in Eugene. So it's going to be mayor, city council. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And is that it? Is that the only seats? Also, I guess you would have like Lane County board seats and those kind of seats. Is that correct?
EWEB is the other one that falls under the Lane County city officers label. And once we adopt it citywide, we can absolutely go and do the same thing countywide. There's actually a Lane County Charter Commission that's looking at that right now.
Yeah.
So the plan is to have one consistent system for Oregon voters. And I think that once we set up STAR voting as a legitimate, viable option, there's really a ton of other jurisdictions that are excited and ready to do it.
Of course. And I mean, once Eugene does it, people are going to love it. That's the thing. Go ahead.
Well, and this, STAR voting has been already used in a public binding election in the form of the Independent Party of Oregon used it for their nominating process in 2020. And in part, as because of that, they are one of the endorsers of STAR voting for Eugene. But we definitely see this as Eugene is where STAR voting was created. It was sort of the story of its genesis is one of the odd and interesting tales. We had held a conference here in 2014, and experts from all around the country came and debated elections and voting for a day. And at the end of that, this sort of idea of, what would a system look like that combined the best features of ranked choice and approval voting? What would that look like? And that was sort of the inspiration for STAR. But it's very much a Eugene homegrown solution for what is clearly a global problem of equitable representative democracy. And so Eugene is the starting point, but we have a statewide petition for adoption in Oregon statewide, there are chapters that have popped up all around the country and some around the world that are advocating for STAR voting in elections all over the place.
This may seem like a dumb question, but I don't think it is at all, because there's people. Why is that? Meaning, like, explain more of what the problem is, because I think just for anybody that's listening to this, that's like, what are they talking about? Yeah, you know what I mean? Just, can you explain, one of you, maybe Sarah, could you explain, because I really want to break it down to where it's like, what are they talking about? What's the concern, with our current system?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that our current system has a lot going for it. It's very simple, and it works just fine if there's only two candidates or two political parties. If we have more candidates than two, or we have more parties than two, it breaks pretty catastrophically. And that's because you can end up with a majority coalition, a majority faction that runs more than one candidate, and they can split that majority into two parts.
We just saw that in California.
That's called vote splitting and the spoiler effect. That's the central problem that STAR voting solves. And that other voting methods have been really trying to solve for hundreds of years. So ranked choice voting, it solves the spoiler effect if that third party or that third candidate is non-viable. If they have a couple % of the vote, but they're not going to win, who the front runners are, and you can kind of strategically make sure you rank one of those front runners. But if there's multiple viable candidates, if there's 3 or 4 or 5 viable candidates, or if you can't tell who the front runners are, that's where ranked choice doesn't deliver on the talking points.
Is it, do you guys have a good way to give like a practice run? It's hard for a podcast to do in audio form, because I'm hesitant to use the presidential election as an example, because that's not where we're trying to paint the picture of. This is a local election. This is for the Eugene mayor seat, city council, that kind of stuff. And so I'm hesitant because it's a totally different setup. That's all electoral college, and we'll get confused,
Let's say anybody listening wants to go out to lunch with a group of friends, right?
Yeah.
You can open up a web browser to the website STAR.vote.
Okay.
And you can create your own STAR voting poll.
Perfect.
Saying, we want to go, do we want to go to, Slice or Tacovore or, Drumlong Thai, and have send the link to your friends, and you can actually try it. The cool thing to me about STAR is that it uses this ubiquitous 5-star system, right? Like we have the 5-star system. Every time I use an app on my phone, it asks me, "Hey, would you, give," or you get a delivery or something like that. You can, or a ride share. So that notion of rating from 0 to 5, that's just, it's now just out there in the wild for everybody. But that second step, where it doesn't just add up the stars, it actually lets those stars express a preference as well, and it really is that preference that is your vote. That's the upgrade that really makes it a very accurate system and lets you know that your full vote goes to the finalists that you prefer.
Yeah, we got a question from a viewer. I'm not sure the name. Is it Kellen or Keelan Stanley? Can you talk about how STAR selects the candidates closest to the center of public opinion and it's more accurate and with more candidates? RCW still favors the two-party system to the left of center. That's their interpretation. But what do you think, Sarah?
Polarization is what we're talking about here, and it's really the hallmark of our current system, and also ranked choice voting to a lesser extent. So that's really, I think, one of the things that's most compelling and most incredible about STAR voting, especially once you really do the deep dive to put that together and connect the dots. So with the current system, like I said, it breaks if there's more than 2 candidates. And so voters have this huge strategic incentive to strategically team up with one faction or the other and essentially pick a side and then frame the whole election as this us against them, because if you're not part of one of the 2 major parties, you're going to be marginalized.
Right. I mean, like, we're seeing that right now with Robert Kennedy, that people are like, and I don't want to talk too much about the president because it gets misleading, but Robert Kennedy, people will say like, well, he has no chance. And it's like, dude, when people have 15% of the vote, and I'm not a fan, that's not my point. It's just about, it's about getting what the people actually want. When you're told 20% is not going to be enough, but then the person that wins only has 30% support of the whole country, then what the heck's happening? I mean, that's what we're seeing, that the person that's successful has 30% of the country. And that's it. And so, so I think this is great. So Mark, you touched on it, the website. So let's talk about some of that stuff. starvoting.org. There's a ton of stuff there. You can do your own. I love that, actually, for trying to choose who, say you got a big family and everybody wants to eat at different places. Then there you go. I think that's really cool.
And we've seen many thousands of elections have been run on STAR.vote, that to just give it a try. And it's fun. It's actually, it's a fun way to vote. I think Sarah was also kind of digging into this, is that, people, I guess some, like, oh, is this complicated? Is this not? The reality is our current voting system is very complicated, even though it's got a very simple interface, right? Pick your one favorite. But what that means is you've got to make all these unfortunate strategic calculations in your head, like, well, I really like this candidate, but the media says they can't win. So now I have to pick one of these 2 that I don't really like.
Right.
And so, because you're in our current system, your vote is your expressiveness is so limited. It's like the least expressive kind of voting is what we have now.
I can localize that right now. I mean, we are seeing, and this is what I wanted to talk about, where, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. It's absolutely where we're in this primary for Eugene. we're not going to see it's a nonpartisan seat for mayor, though, correct? So it's not really a primary.
Yep.
But the thing is that people are going to feel like they're expecting to see someone on the ballot that they're not going to see, because in other seats where they're like in the House representative seats, they're not going to vote for anybody because the actual run is against 2 Democrats. And so, you know, I support Doyle Canning, first of all, you know, and she's going to get basically screwed by the party. And I'll be the one to say it.
And this is so there's we can go into the whole complicated tangle of the primary system and the partisan primary and all that. This current measure doesn't address that at all. This is just for the local nonpartisan races. But
Right.
even those local nonpartisan races, the huge pain for candidates is, you know, one is that if it actually is a competitive election, then candidates have to run twice. You'll have a field of 5 or 10 candidates, then it gets narrowed down to 2 in May, and those candidates who are standing up for what is generally a thankless and, you know, de minimis remuneration job, they've got to campaign for another 6 months and raise more money in order to serve the public. So there's a huge win on the local level for an accurate system that can make the choice in a single election.
Yeah.
We do think that there is an obvious next step, which is to say, well, within partisan elections, we should be using S.T.A.R voting. And within the general election, we should be using S.T.A.R voting. And this, you know, the Eugene is really, that's the first step.
So we have a question from a viewer. The viewer's name is Sass. Does S.T.A.R voting help or hurt minority voters? Sarah, do you want to answer?
Yeah. So, and this is a perfect segue from what Mark was saying about S.T.A.R voting actually helping underdog candidates. You know, as in the first place with S.T.A.R voting, it's all one election. You don't have to fundraise for 2 elections. You don't have to mobilize, you know, an 8-month, 10-month, 1-year campaign to win this little local office. And so for voters, and especially minority voters, and by that I mean all sorts of minorities, anyone who feels underrepresented, so that could be people of color, it could be conservatives here in Eugene.
Sure, yeah.
Right
real quick, I want to throw this in. One of the things, the reason that I have you guys on is, and the reason that I started my podcast is because I want democracy. I want people to be heard. I don't want what's best for me. I want what's best for everyone. You know, and I want it's not, you know, and so the way that I look at my views, I'm a progressive, but that means that I want to work with people that are conservative if they're going to be reasonable, you know, and go ahead.
Absolutely.
So
with
yeah, sorry.
There is just no way, if you're in the minority, you're just not going to win. So your vote has no impact whatsoever unless you're strategically voting for that front runner on your side. And that front runner is the one who usually is the incumbent. They're the one who has the most money. They're the one who looks and sounds like a politician. So that introduces a ton of implicit bias in the system. But with S.T.A.R voting, the difference is that even if your favorite can't win, your full vote automatically goes to that finalist you prefer. So if it comes down to your last choice 0-star candidate versus your 1-star candidate, your vote goes to that finalist you prefer. It helps prevent your polarizing worst case scenario and helps find a more consensus winner, even if it's not your first choice.
Okay, thanks for your question, Sass, and that was a good answer, Sarah. So yeah, no, this is really awesome. So starvoting.org. This is going to be, I think, the chance. Do you guys want to talk about how close we've been in the past a little bit? Maybe we can talk about when this started. This started in what, 2016, 2018? Was it 2018 that you got it on the first time?
The system was first conceived in October of 2014.
Okay.
We ran our first ballot measure campaign for all of Lane County in 2018. And it actually, it lost in a plurality. So neither the yeses nor the nos made it over 50%. There were,
right.
You know, it was sort of like the first time out there for all of Lane County to hear about it. Although Eugene itself, voted in favor of STAR voting in 2018. We ran a signature drive in 2020 for Eugene, collected well over the number of required signatures, had some issues with the verification of those signatures, and so ultimately decided to do it again in this signature gathering phase, and made it on the ballot by a good stretch here for 2024.
Awesome. Yeah. It was tough to do signatures during the COVID time. I know that
Truly.
the Oregon People's Rebate proposal that he was trying to do that stuff. We talked about that during the COVID. It's tough, and I'm glad that we're able to start. We're back at able to get the word out about stuff. Sarah, you had something?
Yeah, on that, it is a total saga, and so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But we ran STAR voting for Eugene in 2020. We submitted enough signatures right before the pandemic hit, and they ended up not counting a bunch because of signature validation issues. And we later were able to conclusively prove that those people were valid voters. They should have been counted. And the city ruled at that time, like, oh, well, it's kind of too late now. Like, the deadline already passed. We don't have a mechanism for changing our ruling, even though we don't dispute that you're right, that those signatures were in fact valid. So that was like deeply personally offensive. I mean, talk about voter disenfranchisement. So we actually have a national voter disenfranchisement lawsuit that hopefully will set a precedent that you can't just throw out voters like that.
But I do think it says a lot for the passion of the people who have gotten fired up about STAR here in Eugene, which is that even in spite of that, went out and did it again. And a huge thank you to everyone in Eugene who signed the petition to get this on the ballot and in front of the people for consideration. I mean, there's a huge amount of work twice by a hardcore group of volunteers who really care about equality in the vote, who've made it happen to get it to this point. So, just and one of them is on the screen there. Her name is S.T.A.R. Wolf.
Yeah, just to add a tiny bit to that, our team is so incredible. I am so honored to have worked with our team, our local team, our national team, and our international team. There are so many people counting on Eugene to model this, to pilot it, and to really put it on the menu for global voting reform. But a third of our signatures this time around were collected by volunteers, and they were all collected by Oregonians, 98% by Eugene residents. It's an incredible outpouring of support the first time around. And so to see people say, oh, we actually got, what happened last time around with the 2020 campaign was we proved it was just completely unfair. And they were like, whatever, we're going to do it again. Because if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
Sure. Yeah. We need this to pass. We need this to pass so that you can run for office, Sarah. That's what's next. But anyways,
I'm really glad you didn't say me, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's not an option. That's not an option. We love you. We love you, Mark, but that's not happening. No.
Thank you.
Yeah. They say the same to me. They ask me in Springfield, you should run. I'm like, are you kidding? But anyway, we'll see.
I would say though that I think that one of the real motivating factors for me and for a lot of the people that I know that have gotten really fired up about this is just that it's the realization that it is our political system more than almost anything else that divides us.
Absolutely.
The way that we vote and the way that that's manipulated is what creates this huge polarized divide. And I think that there's a large recognition that we need to heal that divide to move forward as a nation and to avoid some certain catastrophic outcomes. And that the hope of STAR is people.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, you can talk if you talk to people who are at a very different place on the political spectrum than you are. You will find, I find rapidly that there are a great many things we agree on, and that the things that we agree on actually generally outnumber the things we don't agree on. but that our political system is all based on emphasizing our disagreements rather than finding common sense solutions that work for as many people as possible. And really the hope of my hope of STAR is that, it allows candidates to step up and talk to all of us instead of just their own particular bases.
Yep.
And that it allows us to, through a better voting system, find better representation over time that really is in service of the people as a whole, rather than these aggregations of special interests that are the two dominant parties.
Absolutely. And the thing, I mean, what I found by doing this podcast, by growing and evolving as a voter, because when I started the podcast, I mean, you guys talked about plurality and majority voting, and I didn't know what you meant. So we had to, and you have to start somewhere. And so, you talk about how divided the world is politically. A lot of the times it's because people actually don't feel like they're being talked to honestly, and they don't even feel like they understand how it's working. And that's not a knock on them and that they're stupid. They don't feel included in the conversation. And so, and it's happening on both sides of the aisle, And so I feel like when, like you just said, candidates that are going to be successful in a STAR voting world are going to be candidates that talk to all of us, that actually have a way to be gripping. And those are all of the good leaders in the world that we've seen. The ones that are running as to represent the community as a whole, not to be representing their base, like you said. And I want to emphasize that because we're seeing it so bad that we haven't been represented by, in an election. I think the Obama McCain years, we'll use the presidential election. I think everybody could agree that those are all decent people. Do you know what I'm saying? That are running. And you don't have this fiery thing where they're like, that's my enemy, and if they win, the world falls to shit. And that's not the way, and that's not the way it is. And so it's just so sad. I don't want to get
sidetracked. Are these two, is this the best we can do?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and locally, which is what I will try to focus mostly on, but it's hard not to want to take the bait to talk about the national stuff because it's a circus. But locally, we do have some amazing candidates and amazing thinkers and amazing people involved and amazing people behind the scenes like you, Sarah, and you, Mark, but that are diligent on getting this kind of change to happen where we can feel more represented and be more represented statistically, literally, actually more representative of, by the people's voice will be louder.
And to me, the big aha, and the reason why it's called the Equal Vote Coalition, like it's not just a catchy brand. I mean,
right.
It is a mathematically equal. It's to make us all mathematically equal in power on the ballot. The way that we vote now is not equal. And Sarah pointed this out, like if you like two candidates on the ballot and I like one, I have effectively twice the voting power that you like. If there are two candidates on your side, normally you would want to have more good options on your side.
Sure. Well, because
of that limit of one choice. If you've got more choices, you have less power.
Right.
And so STAR really tips that over and says, no, we need to have an equal say on everyone who's stepping up for office. And the great, like for me, it's like, I want you to have an equal say. I want me to have an equal say. I want Sarah to have an equal say. I want everyone who's voting. That's the whole idea. And what will happen when we all have an equal say? Well, the hope is we get better representation, we get better political outcomes, and we heal this real political divide that we can now all see very, very clearly.
I had a conversation I had a conversation the other day. I don't want to say with who, but he's a conservative. His name rhymes with his name is the same as my grandpa's name. I'll just put it that way. No, it's my dad. We were talking, and he said, and I love this line because he's trying to play nice. He supports someone I do not. And he said to me, well, mine and my wife's vote will counteract your vote, And I was like, it was frustrating because I'm like, Dad, I pay more attention than you, and I'm like, I pay more attention and I know about the local stuff more. And I get real frustrated when people have these, like, they want their vote to be like an aggression, towards somebody. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's just so frustrating when it's like, you only care about one person. There's so many people that we need to be running our government. and so many different levels that it keeps us a sane democracy where there's checks and balances and all this. And I mean, that's a conversation for a different day. But I mean, literally, we're going towards authoritarianism and nobody's doing anything. It feels like. And so you guys are.
The victims are really families. Like the victims are the outcomes.
Yes.
With polarized politics like that, where you're afraid to have those conversations with your dad or your brother or your sister, that tears people apart. And it also stops us from actually sharing real information and kind of checking our views.
And saying the positive things that the candidate that we like is doing, because we all focus on what about the border or whatever issue it is. And it's like, you're saying it as if the candidate that you're choosing is going to have a magic wand, because the dude, like most of the people that we're picking that are at the top, they're not even qualified to be our mayor, in my opinion. And so that's a different story. But the point is that these are the people that they're saddling up with. And they're signed, and because that's what's winning in this current system. And so if that's what we want, then we won't have a vote anymore at all. And so
super quickly, I want to plug a study that just came out that included STAR voting. And what it is on candidate incentives. So with our current system, a candidate has a really strong incentive to pander to their base. And specifically to people who are like probably going to vote for them, but might not vote, or who they think they can convince, people who are like 3-star voters, 4-star supporters. And with STAR voting, that is completely leveled off. A candidate has just as much incentive to reach out to somebody who opposes them and try and convince them to say, you might not agree with me on all the issues, but I'm here, I'll listen, I'll still take your call, and I'll still represent you. If you can get that voter from a 0-star to a 1-star or a 2-star, that's worth as much as getting somebody from a 3-star up to a 5-star.
Absolutely. I love it.
It really levels those incentives. And that actually works to fight the polarizing rhetoric directly.
Yeah. And I love it because
I'm saying, like, I hate you and you're the problem with the entire world. You're not going to vote for me at all. That's how I vote you to vote too.
I love it because it does, like the first thing I said about this, about how that if you want to keep the standard way that we voted in the past, then just put a 5 on one candidate, and then you're done. Because there's a lot of candidates in elections that I have liked, and it's been very difficult. I remember in Springfield, we had an election with Corey Rodley, Chris McAllister, and Johannes Tadeo, and it was like the most difficult decision because they were all equally representative of marginalized groups that needed representation on the board, that needed, just all of this different stuff. And it just was difficult to choose. And so I had to like pick which it was tough. And, Corey won, and it's great. And she's doing great. But, anyway, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a really important point. I'm glad you brought it up. So with ranked choice voting, a lot of people say, why not just go with ranked choice? It's got all this momentum. It's been used other places, not to mention with mixed results. But one of the things that we've seen where ranked choice has been used really widely is that it's pretty common for voters to give 2 candidates the same ranking because they like them equally. So in some cases, we're going to have a polarized election where I've got, my favorite, my last choice. But in a lot of scenarios, especially like local mayor elections and nonpartisan stuff, people will say, I have 2 first choices and then a second choice and then a third choice. And in ranked choice, that voids your ballot. And statistically, those types of voided ballots are more likely to happen to
people that are paying attention,
lower income voters, people who have a more nuanced opinion. So people who've actually done their research on the candidates are more likely to accidentally void their ballots in those ways. People who don't speak English as a first language, some of it comes down to the instructions. People think, in a ranked ballot, why not allow people to rank multiple candidates equally? And
some ranking systems do allow that, but the one that is promoted as ranked choice voting does not.
And then in STAR voting, you can rank them if you want to, or you can rate them all 5. It's up to you. And so I love it. I mean, I think it's just incredible. So again, go to the website, starvoting.org. And where do people go to play the little, to use it to figure out, they can do different, they can set up their own STAR voting scenario. Is it STAR.vote?
STAR.vote. Yeah. And if you go to starvoting.org, there's also a host election dropdown, and STAR now has integrations with a ton of different tools around the internet. So if you want to do STAR voting within Microsoft Teams, or you want to do it in Slack, or you want to do it on Google Forms, you can do that. And so there's great options. You can do it with paper ballots, obviously. And we have a whole team of incredible volunteers from around the world that help with that. So if you have an organization that wants to use it and be one of our case studies, we'd love to help you set that up.
Before we get out of here, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, the thing that got me fired up about voting system reform is that the vote is sort of like, it's the root thing of every issue in politics, right? So if you care about any political issue, I would posit that you also ought to care about the voting method, because that's at the heart of all of it. I just really encourage folks who are listening and folks in Eugene to do the deep dive and check out starvoting.org. We could definitely use more volunteer help as we approach the election. Please tell your friends about this opportunity. The primary is a time when particularly nonpartisan voters are like, oh, there's nothing on here for me. So, ballot goes in the garbage. So, but this time, particularly for all the nonpartisan voters, this is a real time to make sure you get the ballot in. Please, if you're so inspired, saddle up. We
I'm bummed out
all
because
the help we can use.
I live in Springfield, and so it won't be on my ballot, and that is a bummer. And so I'm gonna have to talk to you guys off air about how to get it into Springfield. And so if you're listening,
we do have a petition statewide as well. So everyone in Springfield,
good.
If you want to hop in on getting the STAR voting
supporting it, right,
for Oregon done, this is that's the next step.
Before we get out of here, I want to give you both a chance to shout out anything local, not involved with STAR voting, because I know you guys have multi-pronged approach to life. So off the top of your head, which one he wants to go first, but you can give a shout out to anybody in Eugene and for any reason. I don't know. So it could be something you're working on or somebody that has been doing something awesome. Sarah, go ahead.
You go first, Mark.
That's a tough one.
Well, I just, I would just say I've been really enjoying the onset of spring and just seeing everybody getting outside and greeting neighbors and being a part of a great community here. So
there's been a lot of optimism in the air, even on social media. In a way, there's been some optimism
for everyone
lately.
who keeps the gears of this city running and humming. You have my appreciation.
Absolutely. Sarah?
Yeah, I'm really, really inspired by our volunteer community and our activist network all around Eugene. People are doing incredible work. One of our partners, and for those of you who signed our petition this summer here in Eugene, most of you probably also signed the Campaign Finance Reform Initiative. And they were actually able to get a huge win on that just recently. They were able to leverage the initiative petition signatures that we all collected and take that to the legislature. And the legislature drafted essentially a consensus supported kind of compromise proposal. It's not everything that we had hoped it would be. It's not as strong as the initiative we were carrying, but because it's got the support of the legislature as well, it's the most comprehensive campaign finance reform that Oregon has ever had. So big props to them. For them, for us, I feel this emotional roller coaster of having been involved in the 6 years. For Mark, it's over 10. For them, they've been working on campaign finance reform for Oregon for 30 straight years. So I'm really honored to have their mentorship and leadership in electoral reform.
Awesome. Yeah. I want to give a shout out to all the people working with the 4J schools. I think it's really important they're pushing for that. Schools, anytime the schools are asking for money, that's because they absolutely desperately need help and they need support, and the students are suffering and struggling. So I want to say that. And then I want to give a shout out to Devin Lawson. Devin was on my show. Devin was trying to push to lower the voting age to 16 in Oregon, and is still continuing to push behind the scenes for that. It's going to be a tough sell. but Devin has announced that he is running for the school board in the McKenzie area, and that's amazing. And he's also going to be running for East Lane County School District Board. And so this kid is like 17 right now and is dead set on being a state representative, and nobody's going to stop him. So
go Devin.
It's going to be amazing. And so shout out to Devin Lawson. Thank you guys both so much. STARvoting.org is the website. If you'd like to donate to my podcast, you can go at STRPOD.com/sponsors to donate. I just set something up new too, and I should have talked about this at the beginning of the show. But if you'd like to help me, you can go on Facebook on either my personal page or the Spent the Rent podcast page, and you can become a monthly subscriber for 99 cents a month. Okay, so it's the cheapest thing ever, and you'll get notified when I go live on all my feeds. And if I can get a bunch of those going, it'll be life changing. So that's the way the world works now. I want to become Mr. Beast. So anyways,
2.0.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thanks for covering voting reform.